Gwine Úsle, a dúsbora bhálam cúpla focail rá le haig seachtain na Gaeilge. Fáilte chuig Ollscoil na Gaillimhe agus ar cógáil in bhanachucht in Oideachas innealtóireachta agus riomhbhólaíochta freisin, sé seo seachtain na innealtóirí. Mar sin is mórlam fáilte chur rih cumann na innealtóirí agus acadamh riaga na hÉireann chuig ar campus dá Theangach agus in Bhunaithe. My name is Richard Manton. I'm the Director of Sustainability here at the University of Galway. And as a member of both the Royal Irish Academy Engineering and Computer Science Committee and a former registrar at Engineers Ireland, I'm delighted to bring these two bodies together for this important conference on integrating sustainability in the engineering and computer science curriculum. Before we begin proceedings today, I just ask that you place your mobile phones on silent, and in the case of an emergency, if you can exit through the doors behind you. And I now call on our Deputy President and Registrar of University of Galway, Professor Becky Hui, to open the conference.
Thank you very much, Richard. So, Gia Leaf Gola. Tá fáilte roimh go Gaillimh agus go Hoscoil na Gaillimhe. You're very welcome here in Galway and at the University of Galway. As Richard said, I'm the Deputy President and Registrar, so in the broad sense, this conference is very close to my heart in thinking about our curriculum, the education, the importance of how we embed sustainability within our curricula. So I'm delighted to be asked to welcome you here today. The doors of this building that you're in, the quadrangle, opened to 68 students in October of 1849, and you can probably still see the banners hanging here. So last October we celebrated our 175th year or anniversary since we matriculated those first 68 students in this room. And we planted 68 oak saplings, one to remember each of those first students. And the saplings had sprouted from acorns around the campus that had been buried by our local population of jays, and then having been buried, they started growing into small oak trees. And one was planted at the rear of the building, and the rest were offered to staff, including myself. I have a much watched over baby oak tree in my garden, who was named after a student called Thaddeus Murphy. So I'm pleased to say Thaddeus survived the storms better than he survived his own education, because sadly he didn't graduate. So I watched with anxiety over Thaddeus the oak tree's progress. But in doing that, we not only celebrated our 175 years of educating students here at the University of Galway, but also linked that with the importance of biodiversity, that sense of continuation, and the role, I guess, we have in society as a university. So today, University of Galway is Ireland's leading university for sustainable development, ranked number 1 in Ireland and in the top 50 in the world by the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings for the last 3 years in a row. Sustainability is a core value for this university. We're very proud to be the most biodiverse university campus in Ireland. Have the Green Campus flag, a STARS Gold rating, an Excellence in Sustainability Award, and to be the first university in Ireland to be a Sustainable Development Goal ambassador. Turning to today's topic, engineering and computer science have an important role to play in sustainability and climate action. We need graduates of these disciplines to have the knowledge and skills and abilities to tackle these enormous global challenges that we're facing and to build a more sustainable world for the future. And I'm so glad to see the university working in partnership with the Royal Irish Academy and Engineers Ireland to bring together all of you, engineers and computing science educators from around the whole of the island of Ireland, to integrate sustainability into all of our curriculum. So on behalf of the University of Galway, I would first of all like to thank you all for coming and joining this important discussion today, but in particular to thank the organising committee, so Dr. Richard Manton, who has just spoken here from the University of Galway, Fionnuala Parfait from the Royal Irish Academy, Dr. Fiona McDermott from Trinity College Dublin, Professor Peter Croot from the University of Galway, Dr. Keith Sunderland from Engineers Ireland. And I wish you all an excellent day, excellent conversations, and most importantly, to take things from today's discussion to help us all progress in this really, really important area. So unfortunately, I can't stay for the meeting much as I would like to do so, but I wish you a great day with plenty of fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.
Good morning. It's great to be able to join you virtually, and I'm sorry I'm not there in person today. I originally thought I'd be able to, but I have my inaugural lecture at Maynooth University this afternoon, so I couldn't be in Galway this morning. What I'd like to do is just to say a few words to introduce some of the ideas in my recent book, which I wrote after spending over 30 years in climate and energy and sustainability in higher education, and thinking about ways to integrate sustainability into the curriculum and into everything we do in our higher education institutions. And what I found throughout this time is that we're really not doing enough, and we're not really transformative enough. And we're actually, by not being transformative enough, we're actually reinforcing the status quo and kind of blocking more transformative action. So that's what the book is about, and it's based on my own background. And my career began with a PhD in environmental science and engineering, and then I've become more interested in kind of the social science aspect of things. So very quickly, just to introduce what I mean by climate justice, and for me, what I think that means is a paradigm shift toward transformation. And it means moving away from narrowly thinking about individual behavior change and thinking more about bigger collective action for systemic and structural change. It also means moving away from only thinking about the climate crisis in terms of technical terms, a scientific problem that needs a technical fix, toward acknowledging we actually need structural, social, and economic changes for the changes that are needed to be effective. It also means moving away from profit-seeking priorities toward well-being priorities, moving from a wealth accumulation mindset that is so pervasive toward a sufficiency mindset. It also means moving away from linear assumptions toward much more complex system assumptions, and especially in our STEM fields, we tend to kind of narrow things down and reduce the things we're thinking about into manageable pieces, which doesn't always connect with the complexity of the Earth systems in particular. Another big idea is, in addition to studying innovation and new things, we need to study and understand how to move away from the policies, practices, technologies, systems that are no longer serving us and actually causing destruction and suffering. And also we need to move away from systems and teaching things and that promote concentrating wealth and power toward thinking more about how to distribute wealth and power. And I've created a short video about the book and some of the ideas in the book that I will show here now. The climate crisis is destabilizing our world, worsening inequities and marginalization, exacerbating economic vulnerabilities, and disrupting everything that is essential for human flourishing. Meanwhile, universities are inspiring places to explore ideas and expand our collective understanding of the world around us. But they are also traditional institutions that are slow to change and are not accessible to everyone. For a more hopeful future, transformative social and economic changes are urgently needed. New structures and systems are necessary, and higher education has a big role to play. The injustices of the worsening climate crisis are forcing us to ask new questions about the role of universities. How can the power of higher education be leveraged to shape a more healthy and stable future for all? Can universities become critical social infrastructure to advance transformative social change by imagining and creating hopeful futures? As the climate crisis gets worse, what can universities do to slow down ecological destruction and human suffering? I've been working in universities for over 30 years, first as a student, then as a researcher, and now as a professor of climate justice. My career has been shaped by imagining how higher education can contribute to transformative changes that address the injustices and instability of the climate crisis. In my new book, Climate Justice and the University, I propose a paradigm shift in higher education toward what I call climate justice universities. Climate justice universities have 5 key characteristics. 1. Climate justice universities commit to aligning teaching, learning, and research with the principles of climate justice, which includes upholding human rights for all, reducing climate vulnerabilities, redressing economic inequities, phasing out fossil fuels, resisting militarization, and redistributing power. 2. Climate justice universities focus on unlearning as well as learning. Unlearning describes the process of letting go of existing and constraining knowledge, beliefs, behaviors, and assumptions to allow for new perspectives and information that may not align with previous understanding. 3. Climate justice universities invest in exnovation research as well as innovation. Exnovation refers to the processes of eliminating or discontinuing products, services, technologies, practices, and ideas that are widely used but no longer serve society well. Exnovation research is needed to phase out fossil fuels, plastics, and many harmful agrochemicals. 4. Climate justice universities need to be publicly funded with a common good mission. Too many universities have become reliant on and beholden to corporations and wealthy donors, preventing transformation because powerful interests benefit from reinforcing the status quo. Public institutions with a common good mission are needed to advance transformative change. And finally, climate justice universities need to be distributed geographically to serve all communities, especially marginalized and climate vulnerable communities. Rather than being disconnected ivory towers, universities could be more like public libraries, making resources accessible to all and collaborating with communities to co-design and co-produce knowledge that people in local communities need. For more information, check out Climate Justice and the University, Shaping a Hopeful Future for All. Thank you, and if you're interested in getting more involved beyond this conference, you can also consider joining Climate Justice Universities Union, which is an all-Ireland, Ireland-based collective of people from different universities and communities throughout the island of Ireland who are advocating for larger transformation in our universities for the transformation that society needs. I'll also just mention the book is available to order at any bookseller, but it's also now available open access. Thank you so much, and please get in touch.
Our keynote speaker today is Laura Burke. Laura is the Director General of the Environmental Protection Agency and the current President of Engineers Ireland. She is a member of the Climate Change Advisory Council and a former chair of the European Environment Agency Management Board. Laura is a chartered engineer and a fellow of Engineers Ireland and a chartered director, and she was recently appointed adjunct professor of environmental policy at UCD. Thank you, Laura.
Presuming that on the screen now is the first slide of my presentation, always that nervous twitch, and I see it in front of me, of course. And thank you very much for the invite today, and to thank to Richard and the team. It brings together 2 areas of huge interest to myself, of course, the sustainability side and the engineering side, and a great combination. And when we talk about kind of engineering, often people don't automatically think of sustainability, but sustainability has been a recurring theme in engineering discussions over many years, though sometimes that's been framed in terms of efficiency or innovation, equally important in their own right, but all contributing to sustainability. And throughout history, engineers have provided solutions to key societal challenges, and I think it's important that we remember this. And if we look around Ireland, we see the artefacts of previous generations of engineers that are the foundation of our society and our economy. The lighthouses, designed to preserve life and located in the most inhospitable environments, continue this role hundreds of years after their construction. The transport network of rail and canals, built hundreds of years ago, still again continued this function. And the network of water pipes and reservoirs that supply many of our homes, many of these were built during the Victorian era. So these structures still in place today are a testament to engineering excellence in generations previously. And of course we need engineers and we need engineering solutions now more than ever. So in the context of today, I want to talk a little bit about the EPA's State of the Environment report that we published last October. Then to talk about the engineering profession and the sustainability agenda or sustainable solutions. And then lastly, and very specifically, just to get into some of the work that Engineers Ireland are doing. So first of all, I suppose the backdrop or the context to the discussion on sustainability is the EPA's State of the Environment report. And we publish these reports once every 4 years. And so this is our 8th report that we published in 2024. And what it does, it pulls together not only the work of the EPA, but it pulls together the work of others in Ireland with roles in environmental monitoring and reporting. And it's intended to be a snapshot at a point in time of where are we at with regard to Ireland's environment and protection of Ireland's environment. And it also shows changes. It shows changes over decades gone by. And what's evident ultimately from this perspective is how vitally important Ireland's environment is. It provides us with the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the resources that underpin our economy and society. So for us, Ireland's environment is not just a valuable asset in its own right, but also it is key to a successful economy and society. And when we were looking at the context or the framing of the State of the Environment report this time, one of the things we wanted to look at is kind of look back and say, what has changed over the last 100 years since Ireland, the state, was formed? Because our state has only been in existence for a little over 100 years, which is a very, very short period of time. But Ireland has changed absolutely radically in that time. We now have more citizens living healthier, longer lives in a safe society. And we shouldn't underestimate the importance of that. In the framing of it, we also wanted to look at what's happened since Ireland joined the EU. And there's been lots of discussions over the last number of years, and it sounds like there's going to be more discussions in the context of future years with regard to the role of the EU. And Ireland joined the EU just approximately 50 years ago. And in that time that we've been members of the EU, Ireland has transformed. The quality of our lives has been dramatically enhanced. We have far greater numbers of people living substantially longer lives, far greater numbers in high quality, rewarding employment, and far greater numbers taking part in healthy outdoor leisure activities. So overall, and I think it's a really important message that we all remember, we have made immense progress as a nation. And when we then look at the main findings of the State Environment Report, because there always is this piece, yes, we've made immense progress, however, and what the report highlights is key trends, key challenges and actions across various environmental domains, and just to summarise some of those. And there is an overarching piece that, although we've made improvements, we are continually playing catch-up. And the pressures on our environment are intensifying, and then as they intensify, the window of opportunity is closing. But just to go through some of the key parameters we looked at, first of all in the context of air quality. Ireland's air quality is one of the best amongst in Europe, and meets current EU air quality standards for most pollutants. There are some challenges around NOx and PM. So in a way that's a good news story, but actually when you look more in depth at air quality, we are not meeting the WHO, the World Health Organization guidelines for many pollutants. Ireland does have a clean air strategy recently published, and that has an ambition of complying with those standards by 2040. But if we are to do that, there is significant work that needs to happen. With regard to water quality, the assessment is poor. We have not seen improvements in river or lake quality, and we have ongoing pressures with agriculture, hydromorphology, forestry, urban sewage discharges. And compliance with EU obligations remains a challenge. And when we look at things such as the Wastewater Treatment Directive, that's 30 years old, we can't say that we haven't had enough time in order to address those challenges. On circular economy and waste, what we've seen is that the assessment overall is poor. We have increasing waste generation and increasing reliance on export markets for not only recycling but actually the treatment of our household waste. We export to other countries 30% of the waste in black bins that our households produce. As a first world nation, this is completely unacceptable, and it really shows the challenges that we face, but that we're not developing the infrastructure in Ireland to treat that type of waste. We are also not meeting our recycling targets, and they really have stagnated in the last number of years. On climate, in a very positive way, we have seen action, and we have seen the results of that action. And the EPA published Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions for 2023. We published those last year, and what it showed was Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions were at their lowest rate in 30 years. That is a significant achievement. With that, we also have, when you look at a growing population, so we have reduced overall emissions whilst having a growing population and economy, and that is a significant achievement. However, we are far off our commitments, particularly with regard to our EU obligations as well as our national commitments on climate. And on nature, the assessment is very poor, with 85% of our protected habitats and almost 1/3 of our protected species of flora and fauna in unfavourable status. So, in ways, we have made progress, but we have very significant challenges. And I suppose when we look overall and we say, where are we at? We have made that progress, but we cannot and do not want to go backwards with regard to the situation with regard to our environment. Our membership of the EU has been critically important in safeguarding Ireland's environment. Environmental legislation in Ireland is mostly driven by EU law and commitments. We now have extensive monitoring systems in Ireland that are on par with any across Europe, and these give us a much better understanding of the complex issues that we face. And without this legislation, without this understanding, Ireland's environment would be substantially more degraded than it currently is. So EU membership has helped us get us where we are now, but where we are now, while better, is nowhere near good enough. Our reliance on landfills has reduced dramatically, but we are generating and exporting too much waste. We have made progress with regard to air quality in our cities, but we have increasing evidence that even low levels of air pollution impacts on our health. And while we've addressed serious pollution in many of our rivers and lakes, we are not making progress on the more widespread water pollution from too much nutrients. So overall, the EPA, in the State of the Environment report, which is available on our website, identifies 5 key priorities. Firstly, is we need to deliver a national policy position on the environment, and this is something that we raised in the 2020 State of the Environment report, because while we have lots of different plans and programmes on the environment, we have no overarching commitment of where we want to leave our environment for future generations. And in countries like Sweden, they have made a commitment that what they want to do is have an environment that they leave to future generations that is in better condition than the one that was handed to them. And that gives an overarching framing for environmental protection. In addition, we have lots of plans and programmes that, if fully implemented, would significantly improve the quality of Ireland's environment. So we must drive implementation. And in many ways, we are very good at developing plans and programmes in Ireland, but actually the delivery and the implementation is where we fall down. And this is something that the EPA has highlighted again over a number of years. We must also transform our systems, and it actually links to some of what Jenny was talking about earlier. We need to have complete transformation of our energy, our transport, our food and our industrial sectors in order to achieve a sustainable future. What worked for us in the past is not what's going to work for us in the future. We also need to scale up in infrastructure. And the EPA, of course, are not the only organisation calling for this. When you look at the likes of the Competitiveness Council and many others are identifying that we need investments in water, we need investments in energy, transport and waste management in order to protect ourselves now and into the future. And the decisions we make now with regard to infrastructure will have implications for generations to come, as we've seen from the infrastructure we have inherited from others. But last but not least is around protecting the environment is protecting our health. And sometimes when we have discussions on environmental quality, people think, well, we'll sort out the economy, we'll sort out social issues, we'll sort out other things, and then we'll come back to the environment. The environment is intrinsically linked in economic and social progress. And really, really importantly, when you protect your environment, you are protecting the health of people. So whether that's in air quality, bathing water quality, etc. So that's a key message, because sometimes, again, when we talk about environmental legislation, people think of it as a nice to have and see it disconnected maybe from everyday lives. But when you look at why environmental legislation is being developed, it's being developed around protecting people's health. Again, air quality, bathing water quality, all around protection of health. So that's the EPA's state of the environment. And then how does that link into the engineering agenda? Well, ultimately, in a really positive note, engineers can and are at the forefront of solving sustainability challenges. So the engineering profession does play a critical role in addressing the greatest challenges facing any country, particularly when it comes to sustainability. Engineers are uniquely positioned to drive innovation, problem solving and the creation of systems that reduce environmental impact, enhance efficiency and support long-term societal well-being. And I think that maybe is being recognised in Ireland now over the last number of years, as we're moving from the thinking around some of the environmental challenges to really around the implementation. It will not happen without engineering solutions. And some of the examples I give is that in the context of climate change, we need renewable energy innovations and technology. In transport, what are the future transport solutions without an internal combustion engine? On water quality, engineering solutions in the treatment of drinking and wastewater, removing pollutants that impact on health. And in air quality, things like new low-cost air quality monitors are now available through engineering design that can help us understand air quality at a local level in cities and towns, and then what are the actions needed to address those. And when you get then maybe into specific areas, and first of all, we could talk about multiple different areas, but first of all, if you look at renewable energy innovations, there is so much happening in this space. Solar energy, it's not that long ago that I don't think anybody thought that solar energy was going to be a viable option in Ireland. We are now seeing all different types of solar cells, solar energy storage, broader energy storage, whether it's a grid scale or local scale, hydro, all of that has been developed. Smart grids and energy distribution. We need smart grid technology for a very different type of energy generation than we would have had in the past. Decentralised energy systems, AI and machine learning, particularly when we're talking about this conference being engineering and computer science. And then, of course, bioenergy and biomass infrastructure, the opportunities in anaerobic digestion, for example, but also carbon capture and storage, etc. What are the priorities in actually delivering on this? Cost reduction, we need economies of scale, but we've seen that already in wind and solar, for example. Scaling up from niche, from pilot into operationalisation. Integration with existing infrastructure. How do we plug in with the infrastructure we already have? And ultimately, of course, because in many ways form follows function, what is the policy and regulatory support? What are the drivers that will assist these innovations? On sustainable transport, a particular issue for Ireland when you look at our greenhouse gas emissions, agriculture are first, but transport and energy, key sectors, but transport in particular has been a difficult nut to crack. Electrification of transport, all different types of EVs. But we have battery technology advancement, range, expansion of EV charging infrastructure. Affordability is key. This cannot be the preserve of the wealthy. And we're seeing that with a lot of the technology. And you even look to other countries, and when they talk about their sustainability achievements, it can be in areas where there is a lot of money and a lot of wealth. It cannot just be for those who are particularly wealthy. And again, linking back to Jenny's discussion. Sustainable fuels for transport, green hydrogen has now been talked much more about, different types of synthetic cells, and really interesting and exciting things like, autonomous and connected transport, sustainable infrastructure materials. These are the things that I think excite young engineers, for example. The priorities in moving this forward are similar to other areas. Scalability, we need those economies of scale. Equity and accessibility, as I said, it cannot be for the preserve of one area of society or, the West rather than, other countries, etc. It needs to be equitable. Technology integration and global coordination. We are in a situation at the moment, I think we're seeing particular challenges around global geopolitics. This has to happen at a global scale. And then, just last but not least in this area, sustainability and infrastructure. Future transport or future infrastructure is critical in order. We need the infrastructure to realise sustainability. It shapes how society uses our resources, how we interact with the environment, and how we manage economic activities. Sustainable infrastructure focuses on minimising environmental impact, promoting social equity and ensuring economic resilience. By integrating sustainable design, materials, technologies and practices into infrastructure development, we can create systems that support long-term ecological balance, enhance quality of life and ultimately reduce carbon footprints. And we need to be looking at all of these aspects from an environmental, a social and an economic perspective, because sustainability encompasses all of those. So, as I grab a glass of water, so with regard to that there is so much opportunity in the engineering space, and I think we need to, and in many ways we've reframed the narrative of engineering being part of that solution. And for young people going into engineering, and I always talk, I've two of my children are studying engineering. What they're studying now is completely different to previously, but also they see it as an area of opportunity, and I think that's really important that we promote that. And then in the midst of all of this, what's Engineers Ireland doing with regard to supporting sustainability? And there are a number of aspects. Through accreditation and its accreditation work, through awarding of professional titles, training and CPD offerings, and also our sustainability strategy. So just very briefly, and I know we can talk about it more as the day goes on, Engineers Ireland is responsible for accrediting engineering degree programmes in Ireland. The accreditation ensures that the academic programmes meet specific educational standards required for graduates to become competent engineers. The accreditation process is grounded in competency-based education that ensures that graduates are equipped with the skills, the knowledge and the professional behaviours required to practice engineering safely and effectively. Graduates from accredited programmes in Ireland can have their qualifications recognised in other countries, really important in the context of sharing knowledge and being able to have those opportunities to go abroad. And Engineers Ireland ensures that the curriculum is designed to meet both those national needs but also international expectations, and back to facilitating the mobility of Irish engineers globally. And within that accreditation, sustainability is integrated within the professional accreditation process, thereby assuring that the sustainable competence is a core aspect of the degrees of the education programmes, and that they are realised then when our engineers move into the professional field. So, loads, all of the sustainability aspects there. When we move into the registration of professional titles, of course, we then have the Chartered Engineer, we have the Associate Engineer, we have the Engineering Technician, and more recently, the Chartered Environmentalist. And I know Richard was at the fore of this, or core to promoting this at his time in Engineers Ireland. It's been a little bit slow, I'd say, and some of these things, though it's best maybe to get it done well than done fast. We are finalising a pilot in this for the Chartered Environmentalist at the moment, with full implementation in Q2 this year. And there's already 100 applicants waiting to become Chartered Environmentalists, which shows the level of interest in this. So there's a real onus on us and in Engineers Ireland to be driving this forward, because, as I said, the interest is there, there's no doubt about that. And then, with regard to the sustainability strategy of Engineers Ireland itself, and again I'll look to Richard, because Richard's developed the first sustainability strategy for Engineers Ireland. We've now updated and developed this further under the themes of transform, impact and champion. Under transform, it's really looking into ourselves, because I think when we talk about sustainability, it's always very easy to preach to others and tell everybody else what they should be doing, but we need to look and see what we are doing ourselves. So it is really looking at the measures that will reduce the environmental impact of Engineers Ireland. On impact, collaboration with stakeholders and members to embed sustainability into engineering education, and that's right from the likes of the STEPS programme for primary schools right up to accredited degrees. And last but not least, championing sustainability through collaboration with members, with scientists, with environmentalists, with government officials and other professionals to advance the sustainability practices forward. So then when we look at the training and the CPD as part of this, it is around promotion of sustainable practices, improving our skills and knowledge of engineers around the country, encouraging innovation on environmental standards and compliance, helping members understand those standards so that they're compliant with everything from ISO 14001 to broader standards. And ultimately, developing engineers that will lead in sustainability in workplaces across the country. So, Engineers Ireland CPD programme is key to fostering a community of engineers who are not only technically proficient, but also committed to advancing sustainability with their wider profession and the community. So, in conclusion, Ireland has progressed immensely in the last 50 years, economically, socially and environmentally. But we are facing significant environmental challenges now. Engineers are at the centre of delivering those sustainable solutions, whether it be in energy, transport, infrastructure or a wide range of other areas. And at Engineers Ireland, we will be driving the excellence and the innovation to help engineers create a better future. And I suppose to leave you with, back to in the context of the EPA State of the Environment report, I'd ask every one of us needs to ask ourselves, what environment do we want to pass on to the next generation? What is the onus, or the onus should be on us to pass on an environment that is in better quality than the one that was passed on to us? Thank you very much.
So our first speaker is Dr. Mark Kelly. He is the head of Atlantic Technical University Centre for Sustainability and a senior lecturer at the Department of Building and Civil Engineering. Mark is currently on secondment with the Higher Education Authority as a National Policy Advisor on Education for Sustainable Development.
Thanks to Richard for the invitation to speak today, and it's great to see such a mix of different institutes here as well. That's fantastic, and my own colleagues from ATU. So, as was mentioned there, I took up a role last September as a policy advisor on education for sustainable development with the HEA. And what's interesting about that is lots of facets to it, but ultimately what it's trying to do is cultivate and nurture a collaborative approach to this with all the institutes working together, which probably traditionally we haven't been doing. And what first thing we did was set up a community of practice, and we have representatives from the University of Galway, Alan and Elizabeth on that, and representatives from every university in Ireland and Northern Ireland with Queen's and Ulster, and the private institutions as well. So that's creating a space where people can come together, much like today, and share what they're doing so that we take this sort of collaborative approach. So what I want to do is outline a bit of the landscape, overarching landscape of that, and then delve into a little case study that I'm working on, which is looking at across disciplines, but for today I'm sort of contextualising it in the built environment context. So we do have a national strategy, as many of you are aware, and it's really good actually from an international perspective, and it has sort of priority action areas there, and there's been lots of work on building capacity of educators over the last couple of years through the National Forum Open Courses, collaborating with colleagues who are here today from TU Dublin, UCC, DCU, CSU and so on. So that's been a fantastic initiative. But ultimately the strategy looks at a holistic approach and a longitudinal approach. So it looks at from preschool all the way up to higher education, adult education and lifelong learning. So it's quite a powerful document. All the institutes have been really busy over the last couple of weeks submitting their progress reports. So there will be a progress report, the second one of this strategy in June, which will be released. And it's really good reading actually to see what's going on across the sector. The definition is important because it sets out the opportunities but also the challenges. Like it highlights empowerment, it highlights holistic, it highlights transformational. And they're easy to say but can be really difficult to do. But this UNESCO definition grounds everything that we try and do when you're looking at it. And when I sort of came into the role, the idea of sort of framing this, how do we frame this for engagement across the university sector and others? And, you know, Plymouth University had developed the 4 Cs model. So we sort of borrowed that and added a couple other Cs onto it to a 6 Cs model. But it's looking at this holistic approach. And the most important C there is the one in the middle, is care. And this is caring for our students, for ourselves, our communities, our environment and others. And the reason why we're using this language is because people, as Laura mentioned there, understand care. Like they've either cared for someone or have been cared for at some stage in their lives. So we think it is sort of resonated with people. But we're looking at all the opportunities in this sort of holistic mix of how we can sort of pull things together. And there's fantastic work going on everywhere across universities on this, but maybe they're not all being pulled together into one offering. We have, you know, competency frameworks, and I'm just naming just two here, the Green Com and the UNESCO frameworks, and often people pick one over the other. I tend to see that they're complementary to each other and they overlap to each other. There's lots of really good stuff, and there's publications coming out which is expanding these as well into sort of personal growth and so on. But they are a good framework, and the case study I'm sort of going to present on is going to zone in, if you like, on one of them, which is the futures aspect, because I think it, you know, engaging with all the universities and seeing what everyone is doing over the last 6 months, I see it as sort of maybe a gap that's there and an opportunity, and actually links to Jamie's question previously, and what Laura was speaking about was what's in the future for our graduates. So are we giving them an opportunity, or are we giving our students an opportunity to engage with this? So from and it's contextualized in an ATU context. So in ATU, like we've, you know, like every university, you have undergraduate programs, you have postgraduate programs, and you know, everyone is doing their, as much as they can. The curriculum's quite crowded in these fields, maybe over-assessed as well, a little bit as well. But you know, there's lots of stuff going on. And just to give a couple of examples of sort of engagement, and my colleague Jan Gotcha has kindly sent me these photographs of like how do we engage students in these issues. So in the photographs you see there is examples of the climate fresque workshop, which some of you will be familiar with, and also using SDGs games to engage the students in different ways rather than just presenting facts to them of how bad the built environment is or how much we have to achieve. And obviously we have a focus within the department as well, and particularly circular economy, master's programme on that, a research group on it, working quite closely with industry on it, and then we're part of the DASB group. So there's lots going on, but to be truthful, there probably isn't a horizontal and vertical integration across every programme that we actually need from a sustainability and SDGs perspective. So what I'm looking at is, potentially how do we use external resources and how do we sort of merge this into sort of a futures aspect. And obviously, as was mentioned at the professional bodies already, there's lots of really good stuff going on out there as well, outside of the classroom walls, if you like. And just to highlight a couple of things, like the CIOB Student Challenge last week, which ATU won, so I had to put that in. They framed it in the SDGs. Like the challenge was a global housing crisis framed within the SDGs. So that's really sort of exciting to see that the students were allowed to engage in that. I think it was mentioned earlier on, and there's an event coming up in TU Dublin about Engineers Ireland and sustainability competencies. And TU Dublin are releasing a micro-credential on the Green Competency Framework for Engineers. Like that's really good, really positive. And Engineers Ireland also have a really interesting thing on cities of the future. So all of these issues, we tend to, when we talk about futures, we look at schools more than when we look at higher education. And a lot of the initiatives you'll see internationally focus on schools, and I understand that, but from an educational perspective, is there a way to embed it within the curriculum? So I've sort of always been interested in this space, and then when it was highlighted, of course, in UNESCO's anticipatory competency, or the EU Green Competencies had a dedicated session to it, I thought there's an opportunity here. So in Green Com, it has different aspects to it. And so when you explore the different detail behind them, what's interesting is, it's trying to address the complexity, it's trying to address the uncertainty, the ambiguity of all the things that we're facing, but also is there opportunities for a sort of imagination and creativity in this? Can we explore futures? So futures thinking isn't prediction, that's foresight. Futures thinking is allowing a space in our curriculum where we can imagine different types of futures. And I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. When I'm thinking about this across all disciplines, but particularly looking to sort of pilot in the built environment discipline, I sort of go back to a piece of work I did back in 2012, actually here as part of a CELT programme, an MA in academic practice. And at the time I was looking at sort of foresight methodologies in the curriculum and piloting them with students. And what was interesting at the time was we were obviously coming out of the economic recession. There was lots of reports. One famous report was never waste a good crisis. How do you reimagine things? And so the framing was, is there an opportunity to rethink the way we do things? So just to give you a couple of insights into that and pick out a couple of things. So there's lots of different aspects to it, but two things that we utilised was steep analysis, and you can see the explanation of the categories there, but it was to get the students to engage, rather than present the students with a slide with 30% emissions, 50% waste and so on, was to get the students to engage with different articles, current articles. So we used newspapers, which was quite quaint now, I suppose, and they identified different articles related to those categories. And then they had to look at the interconnections between them. And this allowed them the sort of freedom to sort of create their own dialogue. And then it progressed on to looking at it, well, how does this affect the built environment? And then how does it affect your discipline? And how does it affect your potential graduate role, if you like? And so that took place over a number of weeks. And, it was really interesting to see how the students began to see the interconnections and the complexity. It's a very simple exercise, taken out of foresight and futures, but it worked really well. The second one was using scenarios and backcasting. So it was to give students potential scenarios of the future. And there was a really good report out at the time, or a couple of years beforehand, called Powering Our Lives, looking at sort of the energy transition in the UK. And they had a series of scenarios. And so we essentially got the students to engage in the scenarios in different groups, and then to backcast from that date, say I think it was 2030, what needs to happen in 2025, what needs to happen in 2020. And again, it was to create that space of sort of imagination and creativity, They weren't designing the scenarios, they were given them. Subsequently, we did something slightly different. But in this case, it gave them a sort of an opportunity to engage in that. So this brings me back to the sort of current day. So under a number of sort of auspices, I've been looking at staff development, and especially as part of ATU's European Alliance, which is called the EU Green Alliance, we've been asked to do staff development workshops. And again, rather than presenting facts and so on, we thought, right, we need to do something a little bit different. And so we came up with this sort of workshop called Provoke, Imagine, Act. And what I'm looking at now is how can this evolve into something that will be useful to embed into the curriculum as well. So there's a number of sort of stages. It's, a 2 or 3 hour workshop. But essentially we use, imagery and visual cues and things to appeal to the emotional brain rather than the rational brain. Because the rational brain sort of absorbs the facts and we can become immune to that, whereas the emotional brain can sort of stir up a bit of debate. And so there's some images. The stairs there is from TU Dublin. It's a great visual cue because students are going up and down that stairs all the time and they see the stripes, the climate stripes. And so subconsciously, what effect is that having on the students? But also introducing different things, the rights of nature and so on. So these are conversational openers or icebreakers. But then is to start to do a bit of provocation and introduce some paradoxes. So when I was thinking about the built environment context, I started looking at these questions. These are fundamental questions. How do we solve housing and homelessness? By using less materials. Why is waste still acceptable in our industry? Leaning in on what Jenny said earlier on, what do we need to stop doing today in the construction sector? What do we need to do from an innovation point of view? So these are questions that are provocative, but they're meant to be provocative. That's the purpose of them, that you sort of push. I would call them gentle provocation. There's nothing too controversial there, but gets people thinking. And then you move towards, well, how does this impact the way you look at the future? And there's lots of different tools available out there for looking at futures thinking. I like their futures cone a lot because it gives you all of these different options, but I particularly like the preposterous impossible because that's where the imagination, the creativity comes in. We can sort of frame the other ones, the plausible, the probable, and sometimes they sort of lean into dystopian views of what potentially the future could be. So it gives that range of different thought processes that you can look at. And a lot of the narrative can be quite dystopian, so you sort of flip it into sort of this mix between utopian and dystopian. And it's interesting in lots of different disciplines, especially humanities and social sciences, particularly in geography and so on. They've sort of engaged with this, but it doesn't seem to be there as much. It's always sort of a technocratic solution to it, rather than the more sort of rounded education that was mentioned earlier on. But what it does with the feedback from the staff doing this is it clearly identifies the importance of inter and transdisciplinarity. First of all, it also clearly identifies, well, not clearly, but it does highlight unintended consequences. So a solution that I think as an engineer or as a computer scientist that would be a really good solution might have a whole host of unintended consequences. And to introduce that and allow that to happen. And of course, the global north, Western utopia could be a dystopia to someone else in the global south. And we see that with our energy transition and things as well, and the fairness of that. So that's at a sort of program and module level. What I'm also really interested in is how do we introduce this into the programmatic review and quality assurance cycles. So, Jamie mentioned it there in his question, what should our graduates, and he was talking about timelines. And usually the program cycles are 5 years, but then if a student is in the education system, if they go up to PhD, it could be from 3 to 8 years. And we're supposed to be looking 5 years ahead of ourselves. So you're looking at a sort of 15-year cycle, which I don't think we're really engaging with. So can we introduce this methodology into program review teams looking at programmatic reviews? What does tourism look like in 2040? What does the built environment sector look in 2040? You're not going to be able to predict, as Laura said, but you're going to be able to imagine it and then backcast from that and see, is that meeting our graduate attributes? Is it meeting what we're doing in our content? Is it meeting our assessment? So that's at a sort of higher scale. And this is all sort of work. And there are reports out there, obviously, reaching out to 2040 that are actually really useful to use as a tool for these different exercises. But I think Laura mentioned it there as well, like how do we make this resonate and how is it relevant? There's so much going on in the world, and I just took a couple of sort of local and national examples there, and then maybe to sort of move away from, commitments, we've seen sort of recent things coming out of Europe, to make sure this sort of resonates is really important as well. And it was interesting, the question about the politics, and, speaking a couple of weeks ago at a different event, politicians are quite reactive. They work in small cycles, even though they might be in a position for 20 years, but they're working in, 5-year cycles, as Laura said. And we're sort of looking around and saying who should be doing things. But if you look at the numbers in higher education, like the 250,000 plus is higher education students, add in adult learners in the tertiary sector, add in staff. I didn't even try and put a number on research partners, industry partners and communities. Add all that up. Add in our primary and secondary school students, and the answer is hiding in plain sight. It's us. It's the education system from preschool all the way up. No one else has this sort of numbers to sort of mobilise and collaborate on this. So this is really important that we sort of recognise this. And then last couple of things, the narrative, and I was at an event a couple of weeks ago where this was sort of presented to transition year students, and it's frightening for them to be telling a 15 or 16-year-old this is potentially your future. So do we sort of not shy away from the facts, but we contextualise it? A child starting school in 2020 is potentially going to be in the education system if they go through to higher education for 20 years. So while this sort of projection to a dystopia is happening, the education system is still going on. If you're a teacher or a lecturer who started in 2020, you could be there for 30 or 40 years. So, we can all do something about this to prevent these sort of projections. And then the last couple of things just to highlight, as part of the role in the HEA, we launched an Education for Sustainable Development Spotlight series, and it's going to be running till the end of October. Each week a different institution will be spotlighted on their ESD practice. So tomorrow we've UCC, next week we've University of Galway, and it's all being recorded and curated. But the range of what's going on is phenomenal across every discipline. So that's going to be a really good resource. And finally, I put this picture up because I read an article a number of years ago about Mr. Zuckerberg and unintended consequences of what was happening with Facebook and all the different things. And the author who wrote the article said it was a failure of education. And that sort of stuck with me. And what he meant was he didn't have a rounded education. He had a very linear, as Laura mentioned, focused. He didn't have that rounder sense. So, we're seeing this to come into fruition now with the tech bros and everyone else. And, if anyone wants to refer back to someone who looks at the antithesis of this, is, Professor Orr has been saying this for a number of years. And I usually finish sort of workshops with this, but I'm sort of re-evaluating this. I like this phrase by Gaston Berger about to disturb the present, but the present is already disturbed. So we might have to sort of frame that. But it's an interesting sort of concept. So the last thing, and I'm sure they'll be sharing the slides and so on, the links to the Spotlight series. There's an open call for case studies, an open call for educational resources, and a couple of papers there if you're of interest. So thanks very much.
So our next case study is from Dr. Abir Eshra, and she is a senior postdoctoral researcher at Maynooth University. She has a PhD in computer science and engineering and specialises in DNA computing, focusing on molecular computation and scalable, renewable DNA-based devices for storage and computation. Thanks, Abir.
My name is Abir Eshra. I'm coming from Maynooth University. Today I will be walking you through how to integrate DNA computing in the computer science and engineering curriculum. We will explore the environmental challenges and that DNA computing would solve, and how DNA computing can work on that, and how to integrate that in the curriculum. First, the problem that we are focusing on is the computing is growing the environmental footprint by having more energy consumption and in generating more electronic waste. So the large-scale data centers, high-performance computing, and silicon-based processors, they generate the e-waste and consume high energy. DNA can come as a solution for that, as it is renewable, biodegradable, and it's energy efficient. On education impact, it bridges different science disciplines like biology, chemistry, computer science, and others as well. So DNA computing and sustainability, it can contribute in three key ways. The first is it's energy efficient, as it works at the molecular scale and doesn't need much power. It works with minimal energy consumption and doesn't need consistent cooling or heating. It can work at room temperature. It also reduces the use of rare materials, so the earth rare materials, opposite to silicon-based computers. And for students, it can teach how the sustainability principles in the computer science curriculum. As you see in the visual there, it has key computational properties like storage, longevity, security, error correction, parallel processing, and sustainability, and we'll go through those. So teaching strategies, how to integrate DNA and how to promote it to the students. It encourages the interdisciplinary learning. It goes beyond theory and encourages the interdisciplinary learning by merging the different sciences, as I mentioned. And it also explores alternative methods of computing, so students can think of other methods of other medium to run computations. And it prepares the students for the future by developing skills in sustainability and tech innovation. Now I'll give some examples of some modules that can be integrated in the course. The first is strand displacement circuit. DNA strand displacement circuit is one of the simplest methods or ways to introduce DNA computing, as it's just the basic idea is just two strands, one of them displacing the other. But with that principle, we can mimic different logic gates like and or not. And it can be used to build larger circuits. Students can do that using visual simulations, like using simulations like Visual DSD as a program, and they can use it to design molecular circuits, and they can come out of this core of this module learning about molecular logic and biomolecular computation. Second module is algorithmic self-assembly. Algorithmic self-assembly, it is forming complex structures using predefined computational rules. And students can do that also using simulations like XGROW, as an example of a program, to design self-assembling computational patterns. It helps the students to get skills in scalability, tiling algorithms, and molecular automation. DNA storage systems, which is kind of a trend now. So DNA storage systems, DNA is a long-term and very low energy medium, and it's ultra-dense storage. So you can store in 1 gram of DNA, you can store up to 200 petabytes. Students can work on this module by knowing how to encode and decode data into the DNA strands, and also maybe compare the sustainability to silicon-based storage systems. So that will help them learn about data encoding and reinforce the error correction mechanisms. DNA-based graph algorithms is one of actually it's the first experimentally tested DNA computation in 1994 by Leonard Adleman. He solved the Hamiltonian path problem. So students can work on simulating DNA-based problem solving the graph theory problems. And that will help them to understand more parallel processing and molecular computing. Also, error correction in DNA computing due to the nature of synthesizing DNA. So errors might happen, so students can learn about error, design redundancy and proofreading techniques to avoid errors in storing data in DNA. And that will help them to reinforce the robust computation and error minimization concepts. Another module, also the comparative studies in sustainability, maybe like to do a comparative study course module that compares DNA computing with silicon-based computing, and that will help students to think critically and research the sustainability impact on the environment, and maybe the class can debate on future computing paradigms as well. So that will help them, or they will gain skills like critical thinking and life cycle analysis. Now I will take you through a case study of my own research, which is the DISCO project. It's a DNA infrastructure for storage and computation. It's funded by the EIC. And I was very happy walking in this room to see this structure here, because this morning we received an email from the European Commission recognizing DISCO as by the Innovation Radar, and in that, on the published website, it showed that DISCO contributes to Sustainability Development Goals number 4, 7, 9, and 12. 7 is not here, but it's there in that picture, which is affordable and clean energy. So I will not go to details of how it works, but the background is that every classical computation, the output state is not the most energetically favored. By the mean, it doesn't. It's not the least. It doesn't have the least energy possible. So with time, it can leak and go to the most favorable energetically state, which is an error. However, in SDC, what we do, or in DISCO, what we do is that the output state is the most favored. So it's the least energetically favored. So with time, if an error happens, it will correct itself, and eventually it will be the actual output state. What you see on the screen is just how it works and how the strands are being corrected. So the wrong strand will be kicked out, and the wrong strand will be kicked out, and the correct one will come and be there. So the scaffolded DNA computing, or the thermodynamically favored computation, this is one example of many that we did, which is addition. Addition is a computational, as a mathematical problem or computational problem that can be solved using SDC. So on top, we have 4 positions on the scaffold, and we can solve addition of 4-bit, adding 2 4-bit numbers. And get the output. So the curves that you see are the output. High means 1, low means 0. So the first one is 10 plus 3 equals 13. We have 3 high curves and 1 low, so that's 1, 1, 0, 1, which is 13 in binary. And one goal of DISCO was to scale up that to run larger, to do larger space problems. So we are on track now. The bottom one is, I just did this experiment last week, so it's kind of cutting-edge research. So it's computing 2 25-bit number. So on 25 positions, so the computation, as you can see, it's 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. So on the graph, it's the dots are the zeros and ones. So that's the computation. Okay. So practical strategies, how to integrate DNA into the curriculum, into the computer science and engineering curriculum. It can be introduced in the classroom either by adding to an existing course. I will not say let's do one full course for DNA computing now, so let's start small. So it can be added as added to an existing course, or offered as a short-term workshop, maybe like in summer courses or something, as hands-on DNA computing. Also to encourage interdisciplinary collaboration. So computer science can collaborate with biology or chemistry, so they can give the lab access so the students can actually run the computations experimentally. And by integrating DNA computing step by step, we can make it accessible to a wider range of students and educators. How to overcome the challenges? The challenge that I see, the first is limited lab access, as computer science labs don't have wet labs. So this can be solved either by working with biology and chemistry, as I said, or if that's not possible at the beginning, students can just use simulation tools. The second challenge is the lack of instructor expertise. It's still kind of a narrow research direction. So we can offer faculty workshops to increase the number of the educators, and of course start small to introduce it as a module before expanding and making it as a full course. So how can we prepare the students for sustainable computing future? I see DNA computing is one option that can be promoted to students, as it's an interdisciplinary topic, so students can learn different skill sets. Of course, it's a practical, exciting interdisciplinary solution addressing the energy efficiency, rare material consumption, e-waste, and computational scalability. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Elizabeth Hurley. Elizabeth is a lecturer in Sustainability and Education for Sustainable Development at the University of Galway. She has 20 years' experience in secondary and higher education, focusing on environmental systems and sustainable development. Her expertise is in the design of curriculum and instruction that supports education for sustainable development in disciplinary contexts. Thanks, Elizabeth.
My name is Elizabeth Hurley. I am one of 2 lecturers here at the University of Galway, funded by HEA's Settle Fund to support education for sustainable development. We are based in the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, and our remit is to embed the SDGs and key sustainability competencies into all undergraduate and postgraduate degree programs. Obviously, this is a big chunk of work, but our position within CELT enables us to begin offering professional development and pedagogical support to anyone interested in embedding sustainability in the curriculum right now. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. My colleague and I decided to design a micro-credential for embedding sustainability in the curriculum. We had these goals in mind as we set out to do this. First, obviously, we wanted to explore sustainability topics, pedagogy, and curriculum design. And it really needed to be suitable for an interdisciplinary audience, because this module was going to be made available to anyone interested in doing this work that was here on campus. We were really keen to address the barriers related to embedding sustainability in the curriculum that relate to expertise, resources, and time. And finally, we did hope to be able to launch a community of practice as a result of running this micro-credential. So we developed these 4 learning outcomes that are based on the goals that we had. We wanted everyone to be able to evaluate how issues of sustainability related to their discipline, to be able to identify and utilize appropriate pedagogical strategies, obviously to be able to design curriculum, and then to contribute to communities of practice and work with their colleagues here on campus. In terms of assessment, we designed a final project that asked everyone to integrate the SDGs and sustainability competencies into their module or part of a module or some body of work. And we requested 3 deliverables: a final report, a video that summarized their work and could be shared with other participants in the module, and a final reflection. In terms of formative assessment, everyone engaged in an SDG mapping exercise, a series of reflections, and many in-class discussions. All right, so the module ran in the fall semester of 2024, and we had 7 sessions. Each session was 3 hours long. We met in person every single time, and we met every other week. The first 5 sessions focused on a variety of sustainability topics, and the final 2 sessions focused in on curriculum design. So the purpose of the first sustainability sessions was to explore sustainability and to start to think about how sustainability would relate to one's disciplinary content. Fortunately, we have numerous colleagues on campus who are doing great work in the area of sustainability and were willing to give us their time and help us co-create these sessions and even deliver these sessions. So we are very grateful for that. We opened up with exploring the various sustainability frameworks, including the SDGs, planetary boundaries, and donut economics. We then got everyone out of the classroom to explore our fabulous campus resources. We took a walk along our biodiversity trail, and actually this is a photo of one of the beehives on that trail. We walked our SDG trail and visited our outdoor learning spaces. Then we had Una Fitzgerald, who's in the School of Engineering, come in and talk about her great work to green our laboratory spaces. Although many of the participants don't work in labs or have any use for the labs themselves, what Una shared were great ideas around thinking about the materials that we use, efforts to reduce waste and reduce energy, and a lot of good ideas came out of that people were able to take back to their schools and departments. We talked about climate science and possible future scenarios and how to talk about all of that with our students. We had someone come in from the EDI office to talk about the importance of decolonizing the curriculum, ensuring that our reading lists and our resources represent diverse voices and perspectives, that we are addressing issues related to epistemic justice, and that our classrooms are inclusive. And then finally, we wrapped up talking about strategies for supporting students dealing with eco-anxiety and climate anxiety, which we can expect to maybe get more prevalent, especially as we introduce more sustainability into our curriculum. So that's great. It's great to be thinking about how our discipline relates to sustainability and teaching our students about that. But as we've been talking about, that's not the end of the story. It's important that we're also helping our students develop skills and values, attitudes and motivation that will support them in their work moving forward. So at this time, to kick off our curriculum design focused sessions, we introduced the sustainability competence frameworks, specifically the UNESCO key competencies for sustainability and the green comp frameworks, and talked about how those competencies can be operationalized in learning outcomes that relate to the cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral learning domains. And then how to use appropriate pedagogy, experiential, transformative pedagogy to support achievement of those learning outcomes and thus the development of those competencies. What's important to note here is that these sessions were held as workshops. So, for example, after we talked about designing cognitive and socio-emotional behavioral learning outcomes, everyone was given time then to start actually engaging in that work, writing learning outcomes for their module, and so that gift of time was really important to everyone. In addition, because we were in this interdisciplinary group of people, everyone was able to learn from each other, learn with each other, exchange ideas, and my colleague and I were there to serve as additional resources. So in the end, we had 16 participants, and that was our maximum capacity. Our participants came from 3 of our 4 colleges and student services. 4 of our participants were from engineering and computer science. And when we looked at the work submitted, we saw, as expected, revised and newly crafted learning outcomes, modified assessments that were increasingly authentic. A couple of participants noted that they had already included sustainability in their curriculum, but they hadn't made those connections evident to students, and that was something that they wanted to improve upon. Most everyone updated their reading lists to be more diverse and inclusive. And a few things to note. One participant suggested an improvement to one of our outdoor learning spaces that would transform it from simply a space to learn
but turn it into also a tool for learning. One other participant redesigned 4 core modules of an MA program to include more sustainability, and yet another developed an entire guidance document and checklist that could be provided to every module lead within the program to help them include more sustainability in their module. In addition, they provided an example of how this could be done. So really great, impressive work. In terms of feedback, what we heard was that embedding sustainability in the curriculum may indeed improve the learning experience for our students, help produce graduates that value sustainability and carry that forward into their work, would better prepare them to deal with real-world challenges. And this is something that we can do no matter what we teach, what the focus of our module is. And importantly, we heard this over and over and again, everyone was grateful to have had the time to sit and reflect on their teaching, on their curriculum, and then dig in and start rethinking, reimagining, and revising what they were doing. So what did we learn? What did we take away? We believe that a solutions grow from place approach is extremely important to overcoming some of the barriers to embedding sustainability in the curriculum. By bringing in the colleagues of ours that have expertise in sustainability, exploring our campus resources, and doing all of this work in an interdisciplinary cohort of peers really helped everyone develop knowledge of sustainability, start understanding the pedagogical practices that would help them feel comfortable embedding sustainability into their curriculum. They became aware of the resources that we have right here on campus that they can leverage, the physical resources, as well as the fact that their colleagues are great resources as well. And again, importantly, we gave them the gift of time, which we know is in very short supply. We did indeed lay the groundwork for our community of practice, which is just getting off the ground. And more importantly, I believe we developed a sense of community, a shared sense of responsibility for and interest in doing this work, in building more sustainability into our curriculum. My colleague and I have also done our share of reflection since wrapping up the micro-credential. We know this is really hard, right? We all have a lot of content that we have to fit into our modules. We have accreditation standards that matter, and we're trying to connect to the SDGs, and now we've got these lists of competencies, and it becomes very overwhelming very, very quickly. So we've been thinking a lot about how we can reframe this and how we can talk to people about embedding sustainability in the curriculum in a way that is helpful. And one of the things that we've landed on is to frame it as a desire to help students develop a commitment to sustainability. Using this kind of shifts our focus, and then the next steps become a little bit more clear. If what we're aiming to do is help students develop a commitment to sustainability, then the next step is figuring out how we help them explore the intellectual, the emotional, and the behavioral dimensions of sustainability within our disciplinary content. I'm not saying that the SDGs and key competencies don't matter. They absolutely do. But they can serve as guiding frameworks, as normative frameworks, and resources that inform the curriculum development process rather than just as checklists and things that we have to add in and tack on to what we're doing. So what are our next steps? We will continue to explore a variety of sustainability topics based on need and input. Some suggestions have been to add in AI, carbon footprints, greenhouse gas accounting, which is great. And of course, we will continue to work with our colleagues to co-create this piece of the micro-credential. And then we are going to try shifting our focus to one of helping students develop this sustainability commitment. We really think this is going to be, kind of freeing and open up some very healthy critical reflection around how to incorporate and embed sustainability into our disciplinary content in a way that is most appropriate for what we're doing. So that's all I have. Any questions?
fourth case study will be presented by Dr. Beatrice Smith and Natalie Lecelaire from Queen's University Belfast. Natalie is the Climate and Sustainability in the Curriculum Officer at Queen's. Her work is focused on developing strategies that embed the UN SDGs in both academic and extracurricular activities. Natalie also runs the Sustainable Futures Through Education Advisory Group, which aims to advance the integration of sustainability principles into the university's curriculum. And Beatrice is a senior lecturer in the School of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at Queen's. She teaches modules at undergrad and master's level on sustainable energy and transportation, power and systems. Her research interests include environmental impacts, life cycle analysis and bioresources.
Thank you so much for inviting us along. What we wanted to really focus on today was looking at how we take those into the institutional pieces and join them up with the bottom, so top down, bottom up. We're working through really looking at that university level approach, then focusing more on embedding sustainability in teaching before focusing on the benefits, the challenges and what's next, what are we going to do next. The institution, very similar to probably many other institutions, embedded the SDGs, United Sustainable Development Goals, into our 2030 strategy. That would be ranging from activities in research, education, right through to leadership promoting the SDGs in general communications. It was also backed up by a net zero plan which came out. So the focus was really about bringing this aspiration forward and connect it with our student body, our staff body. The problem was we didn't really know what was going on. We could easily point out specific examples of really good practice, programs, modules, which were absolutely fantastic, but we really didn't have a full picture of what was going on across the entire university. So similar, I suppose, to what was happening in some programs, some modules, where they mapped those directly to the SDGs, we took a full institutional approach from the outside looking in and mapped across all 2,400 modules. Now, we did it in a way that we didn't take the subject experts. What we did was we took it as outsiders. So what would our students see? What would we see? How hard was it to actually get that information? And it was not easy. I mean, my hair has gone grey doing this. But it was really, really important that we took what we wanted to do at an institutional level and connected it to what was happening on the ground at that time. It gave us data, it gave us a dashboard, it gave us a really clear picture across the entire institution of what was going on. But it also gave us a way to track progress, monitor as an institutional alignment, look at what was happening here and why wasn't it happening here, or was it happening but it just wasn't being called out. So it really looked at raising the visibility across the institution. And this allowed us to really look at how we needed to embed in our policies, our systems, our institutional commitments, into our academic support for staff, and into our student learning opportunities, what we needed to do at top level to make it happen and make it easier for the bottom level. So looking at the institutional perspective around policies and systems, one of the things, and you've heard it here today, is staff do not have time to put this in. Unless it's part of a module which you're already teaching, it's really hard to encourage it to be added into something which is possibly aligning with it, but maybe hasn't looked at it in detail. So we started looking at the promotion criteria for staff, academic profiles, and having it called out so that they could actually say, yes, I am doing this. I can say I'm doing it. I'm getting recognition for it. Second thing we've done is we've looked at our systems. So whilst we knew the Sustainable Development Goals were being addressed in the curriculum, there was no way for us to track it. We couldn't say across the institution, for SDG 4, this is what we are doing. These are the modules and this is what's happening within those modules. It was incredibly difficult to get that big picture. So we built into our computer systems, which now allows us to track it. We can identify clearly which modules are supportive of the SDGs, which are inclusive, which are focused. And then it allows us to say, okay, well, we've got 40% of our modules. These are the ones we really want to target and look at. How can we work with staff to do that? We also introduced a local sustainability action plan at school level. And within that, which allows schools to look more holistically across all of the areas within their school, research and teaching was called out in that, so that they could identify really clear goals, targets that they wanted to do. And one of those will be around developing curriculum, training staff, supporting staff, creating time to do this. And then we looked at that module integration. Could we, well, it's not could we have gone ahead and already done it. So when a member of staff is creating a new module or doing a module amendment form or a module review form, the SDGs are there within the paperwork, within the documentation. So before they start kind of developing that and submitting it through to academic affairs for approval, it's there, it's already called out for staff. So we've embedded it at that level. The next part was around that academic support. What can we do for our academic colleagues and how can we support them in embedding the sustainability development goals into their curriculum? So this is, bearing in mind we're in a 5-year plan, we've got 5 more years to go, but one of the ones which we're working on at the moment is developing an ESD Foundations programme. The people quite often still think this is environmental rather than thinking of the other aspects. So what we wanted to do was go out to staff, talk about what the SDGs are and how they could embed that into their curriculum, into their teaching. We also have up and running now a CEDA certified leading ESD in the curriculum programme, which is a 12-week programme, and Beatrice is going to talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. And we've developed our community of practice, bringing together staff from across the university to look at that interdisciplinary collaboration. What can we do together? What can we make work? So whether it's bringing our marketing students together with our healthcare students, looking at healthcare, community healthcare projects. How do we market that? How do we get that out into the community? Whereas healthcare students, that's not their area of priority. They're not being taught that. And marketing students need a fantastic example, a real-life example that they can take forward. So that's kind of our thought behind our community of practice. We've also looking at expanding our living labs on campus and taking those, we currently do them on campus, within the community, working with the Belfast City Council, looking at Northern Ireland scale, looking internationally through COIL, Collaborative Online International Learning Programmes, connecting with universities overseas, that our students can share their research with students in America, for example, and that they can work collaboratively there. We're also raising the profile for our students to say this degree programme embeds sustainability. This is what we're doing, because quite often we get the call back from students saying, no, we do nothing at all around sustainability, which is just not true. It's just not being called out. And that's part of what we're doing with staff, but also within our systems as well. And then moving towards Green Comp for a lot of our training programmes, our student development programmes, working with staff as well. So from an institutional point of view, we could not have built any of those and built them so that they work for staff unless we knew what was going on the ground at the moment. So one of the most valuable things I cannot understate was the value of looking at the entire institution as a whole. What was happening at modular level, at programme level, as a whole institution. What we went on, one programme which Beatrice is going to go on and talk about, is how it's now been embedded within the curriculum. And that's around our leading sustainability development, sustainable development in the curriculum programme. That's a 12-week training course. We have 4 inbuilt assessments. It was developed and piloted in 2023, and we received full accreditation from CEDA in 2024. The idea behind this programme is really looking at our programme leads, the key people who can influence others, how our programmes are developed, and then what we can do within our modules to build those back up again. Sometimes it's just a small tweak. It's just about taking a slightly side-on view. Sometimes it's taking a program in physics or mathematics where academics were saying, absolutely not, no, it has no relevance to us at all. And they went out as one of our champions at the end of the course. So it's a fantastic experience and fantastic to see what happens within that. This has been aligned with the UNESCO competencies, so we're kind of doing a combination between Green Comp and the UNESCO competencies to look at that futures thinking, the systems thinking, and working with staff, giving them time each week to look at how they can actually integrate it. And then they have the systems behind the scenes which is supporting them all the way through that. Beatrice, can I hand over?
Thank you, Natalie. So I realise I'm standing between everybody and their lunch, so I'll try to keep this brief. But now that Natalie has given you an idea of what we're doing from the top down in the university, I'm going to talk about it from my perspective as a lecturer in the classroom and what I've been doing from the bottom up. I've been teaching sustainable energy modules for the past 13 years or so, so I am on board with sustainability. But you say the words transformative pedagogy to me and I get a bit twitchy and nervous. So I signed up to do this course. I figured I pretty much needed it. And I find the course to be really beneficial. I think, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, one of the values was it gave me time. It made me sit down and think, what do I want to teach? Why do I want to teach it? And how is the best way to go about teaching that? So I think, as Laura mentioned earlier, we want students to have the technical skills. We want them to have the knowledge of sustainability, but we also want them to have the commitment to sustainability. We want them to go out and actually use and apply those skills, not just think about sustainability as some sort of abstract thing that they have to do. And this is where the course really helped me to reflect on my own practice. As an example, I would teach students about carbon footprinting. And my focus has always been, are they doing their sums right? Can they calculate their grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour correctly? But when I step back, why do I want them to do that? Well, obviously they need the technical proficiency, but I want them to think about their own carbon footprint and ways that they can reduce it. And I want them, when they graduate, to go into the workplace and work within their organisations to reduce their organisation's carbon footprints. So I really had to think, okay, it's not just the knowledge. I have to emotionally engage these students. And that was a bit revelationary for me. I'm an engineer, I like the numbers, but now I have to get down and dirty with the feelings with these students. So distilling it down from an engineer's perspective, what that means for me is keeping it real. It's giving those students the real world examples, giving them the opportunity to get up close with the application of sustainability in the real world and helping them to practice those skills as soon as they learn them. So here's an example of some things that we've put in place in a module in Sustainable Energy Systems, which is taught at MSc level. Now, we would have had quite a few bits and pieces of ESD within the module already, but over the past year, we've really tried to be more consistent with embedding it across every topic we teach within that module. So a few examples. Every year I would have given a rather dull lecture on geothermal energy. So this year I changed it to a short pre-recording, and then in the bottom picture there you can see one of our new buildings on the Queen's site. That has a borehole field, so students get to see that. They get to see how that ground source energy is integrated with the solar panels in the roof. They go into the control room, they look at the heat exchangers, they look at the energy management systems, and they also learn about the other aspects of sustainability that are taken into the building design, like native planting, bird boxes and so on. When we take it to the classroom, up on the top right there, we've brought in classroom demonstrations. So the wee car that you see there is a fuel cell vehicle at miniature size, and it has an electrolyser on the back. So students can see the electrolysis of water happening, the hydrogen being produced, and the car then moving. Other aspects, we have a series of guest lectures from industry, from government, and we've started making use of our postdoctoral researchers. They are brilliant. They come in and they talk about their research with such enthusiasm, and that rubs off on the students. And the final thing I'll mention here is trying to build in space for discussion for the students. So we still need to teach them the sums and how to do those calculations. But then it's putting in the time for them to think about what those numbers actually mean and discuss amongst themselves what the implications of their findings are. Now, feedback from the students this year on these measures has been overwhelmingly positive. They've said that it really helps them understand the content more deeply. Only a couple of slides left. And another module I've been involved in, or I was involved in for over 10 years, was the final year project modules, which is run over 2 semesters on an individual basis. After COVID, we found one of the problems was students felt quite isolated in the module and they were lacking perspective. And we also were really only looking at sustainability, to be honest, as a tick box exercise in that module. So we tried to address both those problems sort of hand in hand. And what we did was we now ask students as part of their project planning at the outset of the module to incorporate the considerations of ethics and sustainability as part of that project planning documentation. And midway through the project, then the students have a workshop whereby they review their project plans through peer-to-peer, through peer-to-peer learning and discussions with their classmates. Now, it's only an hour-long workshop, but I have never delivered an hour-long lecture on project management where there has been such energy and engagement in the room. So from my perspective, I can really see the changes from bringing in those ESD approaches. So benefits and challenges, I think the ambition of UNESCO has been mentioned by some of the speakers previously, and that's where we want to go with this. As I've mentioned, I see big improvements in student engagement in the classroom. The students really enjoy discussing with each other and learning from each other, and they learn well from each other, and they pay attention on site visits. And from my perspective in the classroom, I find that the lectures that I have converted to a fully ESD approach are much more enjoyable to teach. Big challenge is time. It's time to plan this, to organise it, to think and to reflect on it. And that is challenging. So what's next for us? Well, plenty of initiatives going on across the university. I'll just mention 3 here as a taster. From Natalie's side, from the institutional end of things, Natalie's putting in place specific discipline resources for staff to make it easier for staff to pick up on elements of ESD that they can incorporate into their teaching. From my side, I know there's a body of work to be done in improving how we assess sustainability and how we do it properly, taking ESD into account. And meeting in the middle, top down, bottom up, are the living labs. And I'm quite excited about this because we want to use the university estate for discipline-specific projects, but then move out to look at, cross-discipline, interfaculty, and also moving out into the community. So that's all really I have to say. Thank you very much for listening.
Our final speaker is Dr. Haroon Chiliak. Haroon is an assistant professor in embedded systems and optimization and control at the School of Engineering, Trinity College. His teaching portfolio covers different areas of systems theory, control engineering and complex systems science. His current research focuses on the interaction of technology and society through policy planning and networks of resource management and allocation.
Accordion, Tara May Norm away on Shaw, and I am the only thing between you and zero hunger, so let's get to it. So today's presentation, I put together the slides, you probably see them up there, but invaluable contributions to it by my colleague Alejandro Criado, who is a postdoctoral researcher in Department of Structural and Civil and Environmental Engineering in Trinity College, and our master's student, Paddy Gishar. And pretty much the story I'm going to tell today is about final year project. So we're pretty much tuning in to the previous presentation there, which was also about where do final year projects go. And in this regard, previously, I would have given a similar topic to what Paddy is doing there as a very general and generic topic of, oh yeah, differences between centralized and decentralized solutions in optimization and control, because yeah, that's what I mostly do, and most of my research previously would have been rather generic in that regard. But sure enough, as things started developing over the last couple of years in terms of the accelerated crises that have been quite striking and quite impactful on all of us. And like this photo is literally from 2021, COVID, Dublin. And it does alert us in terms of, okay, where we are in terms of our crisis management, our status quo preservation, and doing business as usual. So pretty much there, the idea was, okay, let's move away from it and see exactly what are the differences between designing for the actual world and designing for business as usual. And that was rather a provocative prompt, again, coming back to the topic of provocation from the first presentation today. I do that sometimes in my classes. There's that bit from Mike Davis where he would start his classes by asking people, okay, if I give you a bomber airplane with a full load of bombs, unlimited amount of bombs, what would you bomb in your city? And how would you change the city by essentially bombing it? Just to discover that you can't really change things by bombing them, because, the status quo does tend to be re-establishing itself. And in terms of how crises go, no crisis goes without being exploited to the full. Again, going back to the first presentation, so pretty much that's where the business as usual gets restructured again. And there's no better case study for this rather than, say, the one in Cuba and Haiti, reconstruction in both of the islands after crises that have been both environmental and political for both of those. Are quite illustrative of how the approaches and goals and the ideas of business as usual compared to different sorts of targets. Again, coming back to Jenny's presentation at the very beginning, the one we had on video, is rather striking and was quite the inspiration behind this. Because Alejandro, in his work on sanitation and decentralized solutions, does make the point of decentralized solutions oftentimes being rather expensive in terms of optimization and control, and approaching resources from a somewhat compartmentalized perspective. And oftentimes you think, listen, it's easier for me to actually operate in a centralized manner, to actually have a command and control system that can do a lot of things in one place. And that way we can actually have higher capacity. And sure enough, that is rather the case if you're operating in perfect conditions, if you're operating in business as usual conditions. So if you don't have to build up resilience, and if you don't have to create your networks to be robust to whatever sort of crises may strike it. So if you can afford to have a multi-gigawatt power plant and focus your system around it, that's great. But in the process of multiple crises hitting you and your infrastructure, you might reconsider that and go for a much more distributed, localized solutions. So, for instance, the power grid of Cuba is quite a good example. even though the question is how long can such a system go in ridiculously hard both climate and political conditions for the country. So with all that, we went on to study the question of reconstruction of wastewater treatment in Gaza. So pretty much when we started this project, which was October last year, we had an idea that at some point there will be a ceasefire, there will be a process of reconstruction, and that there needs to be a program of short, mid, and long-term solutions for wastewater treatment in that space. Because I'll tell you that the wastewater treatment in Gaza, the biggest German-built facility in the Strip, was one of the first targets after the Al-Aqsa flood in 2023. So from that perspective, we saw that a centralized solution in such a space is quite an easy target, quite difficult to maintain, quite difficult to protect, and brings into danger, into health hazards, 1 million people straight away. And I'll actually ask you to remember that number, 1 million, because we might come back to that a bit later. So pretty much here we are talking about solutions that we need for straight away, yesterday, in terms of wastewater treatment in Gaza, but also where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years. So with that in mind, here's what Paddy has been working on. So it's an integration of, I have this in nice notes somewhere. Yeah, so it's an integration of housing, water, and agriculture systems. And we're aiming for a modular construction with local architecture. And it's a decentralized, again, wastewater treatment that's energy efficient and combines water and power. So we are looking at, and I'm looking at John Gallagher here. We have nexus perspective here with water and energy, and we are again contextualizing things very locally. So we're pretty much building a consortium nowadays, and we called our project Bidra, which means seed in Arabic. And it's our decentralized approaches for habilitation, resilience, and urban agriculture. Because again, we are very much connected there in terms of both these social networks that are being created, but also agriculture around these decentralized wastewater treatment facilities. And just conscious of the time here, Ringsend serves a bit more than 1 million people. And it's a very centralized solution at quite the forefront of climate change for Dublin. So in a matter of years or decades, we might see critical environment conditions affecting our own capability to operate within this context. So this is not exactly a problem that's far removed or a problem that is imaginary, even if the current context might be somewhat removed from right here and right now. So with that in mind, I suppose I'll just wrap up here and take any questions. Good, Marcus.